My name is John Barnes. I'm Director of Conservation and Learning for Historic Royal Palaces. I'm an architect by profession, but a client for the last 20 years. For us, architects are central to the heritage sector. They have traditionally been in the lead role for determining conservation strategies, repair techniques and development of historic sites. And in our sector, I think perhaps more than any other, they remain in that fairly traditional role, leading the multidisciplinary team and creating the strategies that they then fulfill. We take it as read that all of the people that we work with will pay attention to the significance and the importance of the fabric. What we also want them to be able to do is to manage well. For example, when we have scaffolding up, we want it to be there for the least time possible so that it doesn't interrupt visitors, so that it doesn't get in the way of events that are planned, so that our stakeholders who have been promised dates get the dates that they've been delivered. Architects who are dogmatic about their approaches, frustrated modernists who would rather be doing something else, and those who feel that management is a dirty word, don't apply.
My name is Sarah Robinson. I'm Director of Conservation and Deputy Chief Executive for the Church's Conservation Trust, and I'm a Chartered Structural Engineer. We view our estate as a very precious commodity. The Trust is a charity that was set up in 1969, and it's very clear in our legislation that we are simply holding these buildings for future generations. So everything we do, we have to think very carefully about how that will be perceived by society in 100, 200 years' time. So they're very precious, and they're almost personalities in their own right. What we really enjoy is working with an architect from beginning to end, and we build up a relationship with that person, that we're not dealing with a number of different architects and technicians in a firm, so that the debate, the dialogue we have at the beginning of a project is remembered and carried through, and I think that makes for a much better project on site. If you're a client and you're looking to appoint an architect for the long haul, for a large project, you want to know that you're working with someone who has the same enthusiasm and interest and passion as we do as a client. There will be difficulties, as there always are in projects. There will be differences of opinions, but if someone's passionate and enthusiastic, that goes a long way to making it a pleasurable project to do.
My name's John Dyer, work for Savills Property Managing Agents, and we act for the Crown Estate in the management of all their central London residential properties. One thing that is a constant issue is the use change, because just because the property is listed or protected, it doesn't necessarily mean the use is to be, and we constantly look for architects to look at adapting the building whilst protecting the heritage, but by adapting the use and taking into account the different needs that the different uses may have. I understand where the views of the building being a client come from, and I would agree with that from the aesthetics and the fabric of the building, but ultimately the building doesn't pay the bills, and the client has to have a commercial view of that building. And I think they go hand in hand, but architects have to understand the cost of what they're proposing and how it's going to be paid for, because the only way lots of landlords will want to maintain the buildings into perhaps the view that heritage architects want is to have a commercial sense and a return from that building. And I think they do go hand in hand, but certainly I wouldn't agree with the building being the client. A large number of highly specified buildings now have a huge range and depth of products, whether it be underground heat pumps, different heat sources, different energy sources. Architects have a much better understanding of how they are implemented into a building, and what then has to follow, which I think is really where architects will be coming from perhaps in a few years' time, is specification of the actual products, but with a maintenance program that's linked to that product. So when a building is specified and handed over, they have a better understanding of how that building is going to be used and occupied and maintained in the foreseeable future. I think if I had a single message to give to the architectural profession, would be to look at fees and how you structure your fees. Certainly over the years of my experience, it was always a percentage. Quite often we get tender quotes on a percentage of works costs. Certainly the clients we act for now are very much, costs are hugely important, as they always have been, but it's looking at fixed term fees or maybe more scale fees, but certainly a percentage of final costs. I have very few clients that would consider appointing an architect on that basis.
My name is Ben Greener and I work for the Heritage Lottery Fund, and I'm a programme manager and policy advisor at the HLF. A large part of the work that we do is about finding new uses for heritage, so we have some key programmes there which do that. So the first one is Heritage Enterprise, which is about finding a new use, a new viable commercial economic use for derelict and vacant buildings. These are usually buildings at the heart of their communities, but because of the conservation deficit on them, they might have sat derelict for 5, 10, 15, sometimes up to 25 or 30 years. So they can be dragging an area down, they can be in need of investment and regeneration. And the Heritage Lottery Fund can use lottery players' money to provide that gap funding to get the buildings over the line, to enable them to have a full and sustainable life. I think architects have a key role to play in many of the projects that we fund. The Heritage Lottery Fund was founded in 1994, and since then, in the past 20 plus years, we've given away over £6 billion of funding to 37,000 projects across the United Kingdom. Of that funding, around 1 billion, a little bit over 1 billion of that has been for new build, things like new architecture, new developments, to give new life to some of these historic buildings across the United Kingdom. So it's clear that architects have a key role to play in many of the HLF projects that we're funding and that we've funded since we began in 1994. As much as we're about the past, we're really interested in the future as well. I think you can see that through some of the work that we're doing through Heritage Enterprise and Townscape Heritage. We want to ensure that our buildings are there, that they're protected, that people can benefit from them and that the local community can thrive around them. But equally, we want to give them the tools, we want to enable them to be successful and strong and viable into the future. A key part of doing that is by working very closely with architects to develop new uses, to enhance the buildings and ensure that they're there not just for the next 5 or 10 years, but for the next 50 or 100 years.